So today we'll be focusing on bubble sorting, and we'll be sorting a set of 11 elements within the list, and the following elements are as follows. Now let's start with the first pass on iteration 0. Now, since we could look at the iteration 0, we have to compare the elements towards each other. Is 15 less than 26? If it is so, then we would let 15 on the yellow side remain there, and we would have no swap in this iteration. And then we'd have the second iteration whereby we ask, is 11 less than 26? Well, the answer is yes. Then we'd have to swap the numbers. And then we'd have to go into questioning again for the following iteration on, is 30 less than 26? The answer is no. Since the answer is no, so no swap would be made onto this iteration. Now moving on to the next iteration, we would compare 8 and 30. Is 8 less than 30? Of which the answer is yes. Then we'd have to swap the numbers. Is 12 less than 30? The answer is yes. Then we have to swap the numbers. And moving on to the next iteration, which is iteration 35 less or greater than 30, of which the answer is 35 is greater than 30. So no swap would be made onto these elements. And moving on to the next iteration, which is 5, of which 20 is less than 35. So a swap would need to be made onto this iteration. Now moving on to the next iteration, which is ask, is 9 less than 35? Of which yes, 9 is less than 35. So we would swap 9 with 35 and have the following iteration as 6 less than 35, of which yes, it is less than 35. So we'd have to swap the next element as 14 less than 35. Yes, 14 is less than 35. So a swap would need to be made. And after this, we complete the first pass of the iterations. Now we have the second pass, of which you're comparing 15 and 11, of which yes, 11 is less than 15. So a swap would need to be made. Moving on to the next iteration. Yes, 15 is less than 26. So no swap is to be made. And then moving on to the next iteration, we're comparing 8 with 26, of which 8 is less than 26, so a swap would need to be made. And then when comparing the next iteration of 12 and 26, we can see that 12 is less than 26, so a swap would need to be made as well. And moving on to the next iteration, we're comparing 30 with 26, and no, 30 is not less than 26, it is greater, so a swap is not needed into the next iteration. Pardon my swap error there. And then moving on to the next iteration of 30 and 20. Is 20 less than 30? Of which yes, it is less than 30, so a swap needs to be made. And moving on to the next iteration, of which it's 9. Is 9 less than 30? Yes, it is. A swap would need to be made, with the next iteration being 6 as well, of which 6 is less than 30 as well. So a next iteration would be made as the next iterations appear simultaneously so onto the list. And then moving on to the next iteration being 14 with 30, we'd ask if 14 is less than 30, and yes, 14 is less than 30, so a swap needs to be made. And moving on to the next iteration, is 35 greater than 30? Yes, so a swap doesn't need to be made. So we've completed the second pass. Now in the third pass, 11 is not greater than 15, so a swap is not needed onto this iteration. We'd have to move on to the next iteration, of which yes, 8 is less than 15, so a swap is needed onto the next iteration. And then when checking the following iteration of 12 and 15, yes, 12 is less than 15, so an iteration swap would need to be made. A swap is needed to be made. Is 26 greater than 15? Yes, so no swap needs to be made. And when we check the next iteration being 20 and 26. Is 20 less than 26? Yes, it is, so a swap needs to be made. Following into the next iteration, we check if 9 is less than 26, of which yes, so a swap needs to be made into the list. And we're moving on to the next iteration, of which is 6 is less than 26, so a swap needs to be made again. And then moving on to the next iteration step, we check is 14 greater than 26 or less than 26, of which 14 is less than 26, so a swap needs to be made. After that, we're done with the third pass of the iterations, as 26 is less than 30, so no swap is needed. So we move on to the next iteration. As we can see that yes, 8 is less than 11, so a swap needs to be made into this new list of iterations. And then we're following the next part, of which no, 11 is not greater than 12, so no swap is needed onto this iteration. Following the following iteration, of which was 15 and 12, of which no swap needs to be made. And following the following iteration, of which 15 is yes less than 20, not greater than 20, so no swap is needed. Now following for the next iteration, of which is 9 and 20, as you can see that 9 is less than 20, so a swap would need to be made onto the iteration. In following 20 and 6, yes, 6 is less than 20, so an iteration of swap would need to be made. We're swapping the elements, and then following the next element, of which it's 14 and 20 for the following iteration, of which 14 is less than 20, so a swap would need to be made again. And then we pause our pass there, as 20 is not greater than 26, so no swap needs to be made. We can save the list and move on to the following pass. Now in this pass, 8 is not greater than 11, so no swap is needed. And 11 is not greater than 12, so no swap is needed. 12 is not greater than 15, so no swap is needed. But the following iteration, of which it's 9 and 15, 9 is less than 15, so a swap would need to be made. And following the next iteration, of which is 6 and 15 onto the element, of which 6 is less than 15, a swap would need to be made. Now following the, you see that 14 is less than 15, so a swap would need to be made. Now in this pass, you can see that 8 is less than 11, so no swap needs to be made. 11 is less than 12, so no swap needs to be made. But 9 is less than 12, so a swap needs to be made into the following iteration. And 6 is less than 12 as well, so a swap would need to be made into the following iteration. But 14 is not less than 12, so we have to stop the pass there. Now following the next iteration, 8 is not greater than 11, pardon, so 8 would remain the same and no swap is needed. But 9 is less than 11, so a swap needs to be made. And to the next iteration, 6 is less than 11, so a swap would need to be made as well. And then we check with the next sum of iterations, 11 and 12, would remain the same. And then 8 is not less than 9, so it would remain the same. But 6 is less than 9, so a swap would need to be made. And then 9 would remain there, as no swap is needed since 9 is less than 11. And then we follow the next iteration on the next pass, as we swap 6 and 8, as 6 is less than 8. And then the next iteration, 8 will stay there, no swap is needed, as 8 is less than 9. And then finally, we have successfully solved our list